I'd like to welcome you all to Open Eco Homes 2024 and to this evening's online tour, exploring carbon reduction in our 1990s home, Chesterton. Our host, Iain Smith, will tell us about the journey he and his wife Judith have taken in progressively lowering the carbon footprint of their home since they bought it 14 years ago.
This is the house that we're going to talk about. What we're talking about here is slow but certain decarbonising of a 1990s house, and it's been a 14-year-old journey for my wife and I to do this. We bought this house in 2010. It's in Chesterton in Cambridge, north of the river. It was built in 1991 to a very high standard even for that time. It's a 5-bedroom with an integral garage, nearly 3,000 square feet. But when we bought it, the people who had bought it from new, it was beginning to look a little tired. We wanted to redecorate and change it considerably. But the first things we did before we even moved in was to upgrade the heating and plumbing. We went for a new condensing gas boiler. But more importantly, we moved the water onto mains pressure rather than a tank in the attic. It just makes things easier the whole way around. So we had a fairly large domestic hot water tank fitted, a mega flow 210-litre tank. And what I'm saying is that freed up space in the loft. And the loft areas in this house are a bit funny because the rooms actually penetrate into the roof area. It's a chalet type house. And it removed any need for power showers, which I dislike and think they're very energy wasteful. So we now in 2012, as part of a sort of redecoration, remodeling of the house, we changed a number of the radiators, mainly for aesthetic reasons, but they're actually they were higher emission than the ones that were there before. And even though I had an interesting discussion with the designers, I insisted we all go to low energy lighting at that point, which in those days was a little more expensive than today. It was compact fluorescence initially, and then we were able to go over to LEDs. So the whole house is LEDs now. We had 2 gas fireplaces, which were not really a great deal of use, especially as the way we wanted to configure the house. So both of those were taken out. One of the fireplaces totally sealed up, and the other replaced with a wood-burning stove, which just is used occasionally in winter to help boost the heat. But when we were remodeling, we were trying to choose environmentally friendly products for the whole house. For example, we floored the entire downstairs with bamboo, which is very sustainable, and we did the entire thing throughout everywhere, and it's survived extremely well. It hasn't needed any repairs or anything in the 14 years it's been there, and it just looks nice, and it's quite warm. The floor is it has a reasonable amount of insulation in it, and it's quite nice. That 2013, we decided to fit solar panels. We were thinking about this, but we had to get some work done on the roof at the same time, so we thought we'd just go ahead and get it all done then. To fit in with the feed-in tariffs that were on offer at the time, we were limited to about 12 panels just below 4 kilowatt in power. We fitted it, Cambridge Solar did it for us. They were extremely good. I have a lot of faith in that company, and I've worked with them since on changes that worked extremely well. It's a solar edge inverter. We also have a device that captures the excess solar electricity and dumps it into the immerser, so that if it's shining very nice sunshine and we don't use the electricity, it at least heats up the water, which way if you're heating water with the gas, it saved the use of gas. The total fitting costs were about just under 7,500, and that was fully repaid through the fit and energy savings by 2022. So basically it's free energy now that's coming from the panels. 2013 and in 14, started to look at what we could do about draft proofing in the house. Again, the house was reasonably draft proof, but there's still quite a lot you can do around various doors where 15-year-old seals were beginning to, 10-year-old seals were beginning to lose their resilience and things. So a little bit of draft proofing were good. But the main bit of additional insulation fitted was in the crawl spaces on the first and second floor rooms where the roof comes down across the room. And from that top photograph there, it was quite well insulated. It had quite a bit of fiberglass in between the wooden beams and held in place there. But I then added 50mm Celotex board, rigid board, over this and taped up all the seams. And then that's a photograph of when the boards were put up there, and then put a double layer of fiberglass there as I retreated out of the space. To get into that space, I had to cut small holes in the plasterboard of the wall and squeeze through, which is an interesting task if you can do it, but it's quite claustrophobic in some cases. The other big change at that point is the garage door is just a plain steel door, and I lined it with Celotex board stuck on with no nails. And that made a considerable difference to the temperature in the garage. I use the garage as a studio. I do glass, fused glass work in there. And that made a big difference. Was able to use it in winter where before it had been a bit difficult. And then in 2015, began to notice that some of the 20-year-old double glazing units were beginning to fail and we're going to get condensation in there. So we replaced 45 of the double glazing units, and that includes those four doors like that, with new double glazing units, new B-rated, argon-filled with film in them, thermal, well, it's a film that stops the heat going out and lets the heat come in. The whole thing only cost about £3,000. Glass is not expensive. When you're getting window work done, it's actually the window frames that are the most expensive item. And in this case, we didn't replace any of the window frames. They merely popped out those edges around there, took the old glass out and put the new ones in. And as I say, that cost about £3,000, certainly made a big difference to the house in terms of warmth. So I'm going to stop sharing the screen now, and we can deal with any questions that may be around. So there's a couple of questions there. Somebody has asked if we insulated under the floors. We didn't specifically, but the floor was already concrete. It was concrete blocks in I-beams, and then there was a layer of polystyrene, and then a layer of chipboard over that before we put the bamboo down. So although that's not fantastic insulation, it's certainly a lot better than a solid or even a suspended floor without additional insulation. So no, I didn't didn't specifically do extra insulation under the floors. It was a time thing, and it's quite disruptive. Somebody's oh, sorry.
Well, I was just going to say I can see Hermione is asking about the frames, but maybe you want to say.
Oh yes,
say your question. Hermione, are you able to ask what you wanted to know?
Sorry, I couldn't see what the frames were made of. They looked as if they were plastic or aluminium rather than wood.
No, they're wood. They're all wood frames, but the fittings on the outside are strips of metal that are fixed in. So they were pinged off and the glass taken out. But they're basically soft wood frames, painted soft wood frames.
Okay, thank you very much. And who did those for you?
Well, it's listed in my my report on this. A crowd called oh, I can't remember. Sorry, it's listed at the end of this talk and on
I'll have a look. Thank you. But somebody
So-
looked anyway. Thank you.
but it was a local Cambridgeshire company. I don't know if they're still active. It's out in Abingdon. It's just, I think it was called Cambridge Glazing Company. It was something very obvious. I think I asked about 6 companies for quotes, and they were very variable, but there was at least 2 in the same region as the guy who finally did it for me.
Yeah, thanks.
And so near the top of chat, I posted a link to the case study that
Oh, yes.
Ian's done. And so in that, I think will be, just looking now myself, double glazing,
Yes, I think I mentioned it.
which was done by a company called Double Glazing Repairs, I think.
Yes, I think it was a very simple.
Okay, yeah.
Yes, Pam has just asked a question about, did I add insulation to the garage ceiling? Not directly to the garage ceiling, Pam, but definitely to the 2 areas either side of it, that I could get to by going in through the side walls. So that there definitely wasn't as much insulation above the garage as you would have hoped. And that certainly made a big difference both to the room above and to the temperatures in the garage.
And can I point out, Gainers asked about wall insulation?
Oh yes, well the house is cavity wall insulated. Cavity wall with cavity wall insulation in it. It was ahead of what the building standards were in the 1990s, which would have had to be insulated in those times. Pam, no, I didn't manage to seal around the garage door. It is a little drafty.
Can I ask about the bamboo floor? I was interested. I've never seen this in action, I don't think, but you were saying it hasn't needed any repair or even maintenance. What do you have to do to keep it looking good?
No, we just wipe it with a wet mop, and then put a little bit of floor polish spray, just liquid floor polish with mop over it, and that seems to keep it fine. It's got a little bit of damage from things dropped on it and heels and things, but nothing that bothers us, shall we say. It seems to be very resilient, and it's in theory it could be sanded back down and re-varnished, but we haven't had to do that yet. Gaynor has just asked about shading by trees. We are quite lucky. We don't have a lot of direct shading by the trees, but the solar panels that we have each have mini inverters on them. So even if you get some shading on 1 or 2 panels, it doesn't affect the output of all the other panels. Modern solar panels tend to have that these days, individual mini inverters on each panel and then fed down to a master inverter. Some of them don't even have the master inverter. They do it all from the back of the panels, and that way you get rid of the problem of part shading turning all your solar panels off. Yes, Hermione, there were draft proofing seals in grooves in our wooden window frames, and they're basically okay. The main draft proofing I had to do was on the doors, where, as you can imagine, the already existing draft proofing strips can get worn and settled, so there's a little bit extra in those. Pam, yes, the double glazing units, no, they didn't really change in thickness. We didn't go for the extra wide gap, which would have maybe increased its rating. We wanted to get something that just fitted in the existing windows without having to do any changes or anything to fitting. That's why it kept the cost down, because we just did like for like replacements, but of a much higher quality double glazing unit. If we ever had to replace the windows, I would go the whole way to triple glazing and much different window construction. But luckily enough, we don't have to do that, and that is a very expensive process. Yes, Gaynor, buildings do have to breathe, and I've not taken the insulation so far as to cause a problem with the with a lack of ventilation and circulation. Unless you're going to go to full mechanical ventilation, which would have been far too disruptive for this house, the way we are living in it, I think you've got to accept that, yes, there's going to be a little bit of drafts. There's some drafts you can feel around the skirting board of some of the rooms, but we regularly open windows and things like that. So we don't have a problem with condensation, and that's the key to knowing if you're not getting enough ventilation. Yeah, you've got to have a balance between getting enough insulation to make sure the house stays warm, while still maintaining a certain degree of ventilation. 2018, most of the time we actually spent at that point was developing a wildlife friendly approach to gardening. Reduced mowing. I don't like mowing. I don't do very much gardening. My wife does all the gardening, Judith, but I will do all this sort of landscaping or fitting things and doing bits and pieces like that. So we fitted some hedges and small trees that were very good for giving shade and keeping a balance, and also having a place for wildlife to go at. And we put in a couple of ponds and quite a lot of water capture. and the level of wildlife in the garden is definitely improved from when we first moved in. But as you all probably know, it's improved too much with relation to slugs this year, and we're having a terrible trouble with them eating some of the plants. We don't want to put down any poisons or stuff, so it's been a lot of mechanical removal of slugs and rehoming them somewhere else. Then in 2021-22, this of course is in the COVID times where it was locked down, I changed from a diesel to a electric car, got a Tesla Model 3, fitted a home charging point, which you can't quite see, but it's just around the corner in the garage there. And I really love the Model 3. It's an excellent car as far as I'm concerned. It drives beautifully. It can be very fast if you want it to be, but you can control it so that it's very nice. And electric cars are just a joy to drive. Although people have said that driving a Tesla is like driving an iPad, because it seems to everything on the screen. We also replaced our gas hob. It begun to break down, and rather than fix it or replace it, we replaced it with an electric induction hob, and that was one of the best things we'd ever done. We wish we'd done it years earlier. Not only there's more control, but it's just far cleaner. You know, if you're thinking about it, if you've got a gas hob and you're burning gas, what are you producing? Carbon dioxide and water vapor in your house. We just find there's a lot less condensation. Everything's a lot cleaner. Definitely much more control, and we really do like that. And it was at that point I realized we were very close to getting off gas completely, which leads on to the next one, the slide. 2024, this year, although the planning started a year or two before. Working with Conga Limited, a company in Ipswich, we fitted an air source heat pump. The choice ended up being a Valiant 7 kilowatt aerotherm, which is nice because it does heating and cooling. And 2 of the radiators in the house we replaced with these fan-driven emitters. This is a picture of one in its raw state before it's got its nice covering and stuff on it. Basically, it's 8 PC fans. They run absolutely silently. There's a few thermistors there that control it. So when there's a demand, the fans go on, they suck air in and blow it out past that heat exchanger behind there. And it's much more efficient. You know, size for size, it's vastly more efficient than a radiator. The addition is that when the air source heat pump goes on to the cooling mode in summer, you can switch these the controls round and the fans blow through it and they blow cold air into the room. So we were able to keep a temperature of 24 in our lounge when the temperature hit 32 outside. This house is actually quite good for that. There's a lot of thermal inertia, especially as the additional insulation I put in, which means it's very slow to heat up, but very slow to cool down. So that in summer, it takes quite a few days of very high temperatures before it begins to get too hot in the house. And with the addition of this, it means we can keep the house, at least the living area and the lounge, in very nice temperatures, even though it's getting hotter and hotter outside. And I think we're going to need more of that. The reverter, well, we haven't had it for a full winter yet, although there has been a few days where we've been using it for heating. Seems to work fine. We only replaced those 2 radiators because we wanted the fan-driven emitters. I did the calculations and I didn't really think we really needed to replace any others. Most of the TRVs are removed because you don't want to start doing zoning or local control when you're on an air source heat pump. You want it to just warm the whole house gently the whole time, so that the temperature stays very steady. We've got it set for 20. That's what we find comfortable. Other people might want to set it a little bit higher or even a little bit lower. But just basically it's on, when it is heating it up, it's on the whole time and it keeps it at a steady temperature. Most of the TRVs are removed, as I say, so that it doesn't start doing zoning, except in the bedrooms where you might want to turn the radiator off because it's nicer being in the cool. And as I say, no other changes to the heating or domestic hot water. We didn't even replace the domestic hot water tank, even though people say you've got to. We've decided to give it a try and give it, do an experiment. We run it for a few hours we run the heat pump for a few hours every night on a warmer cycle to heat up the domestic hot water tank. And it's been absolutely fine. You can put it onto boost, you can put it onto a longer thing if you have people staying or you need additional hot water. But okay, the coil is not as efficient at these temperatures, but it's time times temperature that gets the heat into the thing. So it works. We find it's working absolutely fine. So now, our house is purely electric. That was one of our aims. The current supplier, Scottish Power, claim all their electricity is from renewables. Whether Scottish Power remains our current supplier is a bit debatable just now because some of the customer support is not great. There are other electrical suppliers which might move to for better tariffs. The house is basically much more comfortable. There's no changes. There's not big changes in temperature, not big gradients. The whole place is very steady. It's a lot less indoor pollution, and that means less cleaning, which is nice. The air source heat pump produces cooling in summer, which is lovely. And generally, the energy use has been creeping down over the years. I haven't got very hard figures at this point. It'll need this winter to see how the air source heat pump performs. And I'm keeping a record of monthly electrical and gas consumption. I have been doing it for the last few years. So I will, in about a year's time, be able to see if it is a definite step down in our energy consumption. But to some extent, I'm more interested in our house being comfortable and nice to live in than absolutely heavy reduction in energy use. So, lessons learned. this whole thing? Well, one of the key ones was we didn't want the retrofits to be a major disruption to our life. We had lots of other things going on. The beginning of this thing, I was working. I've retired, but my wife is still working. We didn't want to turn over the whole house in the way you might have to do if you're doing a major refit. If we can avoid it, do that. What I think is important is to know your house well, know where improvements could be made. For example, when I decided we needed to get the domestic hot water onto mains pressure and release the space where the water tank was, it was quite obvious there was lots of draft pathways between parts of the house that was behind the walls. We've shut all those off, and they made a difference in some of the rooms. And that links in with the draft proofing. You can use draft proofing and insulation to stop draft paths in various parts of the house. I would recommend you do your own heat loss calculations. I know some people may think, oh no, they don't know how to do that. I do. I was brought up doing them. I've done heating systems for many houses, but it's useful because currently some of the advisors you might get in to do it, I'm not that convinced that their analysis is good as it can be. It's probably okay, but I'm not convinced. But it's very easy with a simple spreadsheet or even just a few sheets of paper to work out what the heat loss is for the house is. You don't need to do the individual rooms and individual internal walls. You're just looking at your total amount of external walls, your windows, your roof, and your floor, and you can soon work out. And there is a way, if you can work out how that compares to your energy usage, to say if you're in the right level for your heat loss calculations. And that, of course, dictates what sort of power of heat pump you want. In this particular case, I reckon 6 kilowatts was more than enough. So we could either choose 5 or 7, and went for the 7 because maybe a little bit more reliable if you weren't running the heat pump at its maximum the whole time. I'd say get plenty of advice before choosing the expensive systems, the air source heat pump and the solar. And the advice for the air source heat pump, I was introduced to Conga Limited through one of these presentations. Peter Miller, the guy that runs Conga Limited. And I made contact with him and we discussed it all and came up with a plan for our house. And definitely choose a consultant and installer who knows what they're talking about. Don't go to a power company who say we'll fit an air source heat pump for you. They want to sell you power. They don't want to sell you savings in energy. Get your own installer that you trust and work with them to get the solution that you need for your house. Okay, I'll stop lecturing that bit. Useful resources, of course, Cambridge Eco Homes and Carbon Footprint. That's what got me to where I am today. The case studies and videos that you can get on their website. For anybody who's interested, the Open University Open Learn course, Energy in Buildings, is excellent for discussing the heat losses, how to stop them, how to check what your heat loss calculations are, and the relative sort of how far you are down the path of being a well-insulated, low heat house. If you don't want to do that, no, you don't have to, but I find it very useful. And the website Heat Geek is very funny, very good, and he pokes, he really blows up all these assumptions people tell you, like you need to replace all your radiators, or you need to put in extra new water tanks if you do air source heat pumps and stuff. He points out you don't need any of that. The one key thing he says is if an installer says that you need a low loss header or something like that in your system, just tell them no, it's not needed unless you've some very unusual very thin bore heating systems in your house. Anyway, I'm happy to answer any further questions, and that's my email address if anybody wants to go a bit further with this. And I will then, there's a couple more slides here just telling you how to get more information and to find out about past studies run by Cambridge Carbon Footprint, and some other information about that, Cambridge Footprint, and asking for your support in some ways. And at this point, I'll stop sharing and we could go on to some more questions if anyone has them.
Thank you very much, Ian. That's very good, and it gives a very good illustration of how to work on your carbon footprint reduction in an incremental way and without huge amount of disruption to your current way of living, you know, which is, I think, a lot of people are looking for, that they feel a bit daunted by big change in their houses to get the carbon reduction. So thank you very much for setting it out as a journey over 14 years or so. I'm sure it will continue. Yes.
Okay, I've actually got the questions up here on my screen. And Tom, you were asking, how did I do the heat loss calculations? No, Excel spreadsheet. And just did, listed each room in the house, looked at the external walls, ceiling and floor, got the U values from the web, and you can calculate it all up. So yes, it's just a straightforward Excel spreadsheet, and then you can play tunes with it. You can see what radiators you have in which rooms and whether there's too much heat or too little heat likely to be there. And as I say, I've done this heat loss calculation on quite a few houses now, and it works very well. Sheila's asking if we include a sample house energy evaluation in the info pack when it's ready. As I say, the Open University course, Energy in Buildings, shows examples of this, but you can get plenty of examples on the web if you want to. It certainly could give people a copy of mine, although you'd have to accept that it wasn't it's not a perfect tool. I couldn't be responsible for your use of it. I could give you a cut down framework of it if someone wanted it. They should contact me directly on that if they want to. Okay, going down here, Gainer's question about noise. No, it's not noisy. The modern heat pumps of today are built to a very high standard relating to noise, and the Valiants are well known to be one of the best in that. And to tell you the truth, I cannot tell if it's running or not if I go out to it. I've got to go in front of it to see if there's air blowing out. I can't tell by the noise. Now, okay, I know my hearing's not great. I've got hearing aids, but I can hear people speak and everything else. No, modern heat pumps shouldn't do that. Now, okay, they're carefully mounted on solid beams and then flexible feet, so that all chance of vibration and stuff is taken out. Yes, you can see people with heat pumps, and you won't be able to hear the modern ones. The older ones maybe had problems, but not the modern ones.
Can I say, I think smaller heat pumps for a given output, if you've chosen one that's squeezing down the size, then it's probably got a faster and noisier fan.
Yeah.
So that's a disadvantage of choosing a particularly small one.
Yes, I agree with you. Yes, yes, that we were mad. Sheila, would you mind just dropping that request by email to me? The email's on the slides, and I'll try and get you something. Yeah.
So I've included a link where you can download Iain's slides at the end there. And you'll find that if you click on any of the links within the slides, like this one for energy in buildings, then that will should work for you to link you to anything like that.
Yeah. Hermione's asking if I looked at AECB accreditation. I don't recognize those letters. Do you recognize them, Tom?
It's the Association of Energy Conscious Builders.
Yeah.
Mm.
No,
So-
I didn't, because basically all the building work in the house, the insulation, all that, I did it all myself. And we had the air source heat pump was there was very little work associated with that. There was no real building work associated with it. So no, I haven't looked directly at AECB accreditation. I don't really know much about that. Was there anything specific, Hermione, that you thought of in that direction?
It's just that I'm interested in ways to make sure that when trades are doing stuff, that it's up to the standard. And so I've just been looking into the different sorts of standard, and ACB is not as demanding as Passive House, and designed for older properties to help get you towards a U value that's more realistic. So that's what I'm asking, really. I'm not sure to what extent it's useful to use, but it's just we've now got regional AECB assessors, I think, across the country now. So that's what I'm asking, because I think it's a developing thing to try and set standards as to what the achieved U values, etc., are. It's just one thing that's going on.
Yeah, that sounds quite that sounds quite sensible. I didn't get involved with that because as I say, most of the calculations and most of the work I did myself. You know, apart from like the person that did the replaced the double glazing units and things like this, I did all the insulation and all the calculations for the heating systems myself. Although, again, the installer did them all himself, and he had to convince himself that we're correct so as to get the MCS grant. We had a bit of toing and froing, and then we finally came to a solution that worked for both of us.
So Sheila, I've just linked to a directory that we've put together for Open Eco Homes, and basically we've taken the case studies of everyone like Iain. There are about 80 homes over the time who have been featured in Open Eco Homes, and so every supplier, installer, building professional that they mention in their case studies is in that directory I've linked to there. So it's a kind of source of local people who have been trusted by previous Open Eco Home hosts.
I'd just like to ask Iain, does he see the direction he might proceed in the coming years, having already spent 14 years improving the carbon footprint of his house?
Yeah, I probably won't stop. I'm probably going to have to change my power supplier, my electrical power supplier, just to get more versatile tariffs. And the next thing is to do the calculations to figure out if it's worth getting a house battery, if it's likely to pay off. But I think I need a winter using the air source heat pump and seeing what it will do, and seeing where the demand comes during the day, and seeing if there's anything then that just to see how it is. I need the data for at least one winter before making that decision. Hermione's also asking if there's anything I would have done differently in retrospect. Yeah, if we'd had more time, might have done a bit more insulation of the floor. I think we touched on that earlier. I think the products around today, which you'd be able to add below flooring, very thin but very highly insulating. We did look at underfloor heating downstairs, but it's extremely disruptive, and you basically wouldn't be able to be living in a house for about 3 or 4 weeks. So I think we made the right choice there. Anything differently, I might have done things faster, but again, I feel I've got in a position when we've done the air source heat pump, we've actually got the most modern and up-to-date one, which performs extremely well. So sometimes, you know, I think if we got air source heat pumps out 5 years ago, you might be saying today, oh, I wish I hadn't done that early, because some of the early adopters, I think, have had more problems than necessary. Yeah, no, basically, I'm quite happy with what I've done so far. So then, no, Pam, the fan emitters, again, you cannot tell they're on unless you look at them and see that they're whizzing round. There's no noise at all. There's not enough to tell you. If you're sitting in the room, as I say, you've got to look to see if they're on. You won't hear that they're on. I was pleasantly surprised when that was the case. Yeah, no, modern fan technology seems to be extremely good. Yes, Sheila, on cooling, you can produce condensation if the circulating water is below the dew point. The air source heat pumps are supposed to not let it go below the dew point, but we've had a little bit of condensation on one particular radiator, and nothing major, not enough to cause a problem. But I did notice that there had been a little drip of water from one radiator, and it was a particularly dampy. It was a bathroom where there was a lot of dampness in the air, yeah, the window was closed to that room because that's where the sun came in, so you weren't getting the ventilation. And we did notice there was a little bit of condensation, but nothing much. And most of the radiators through the house were cool to touch when we were doing the cooling without having condensation on them. Yes, I think certainly in the summer when the sun was strong, it was providing most of the energy we needed, both to do the cooling and heat domestic hot water. I wasn't monitoring that closely on an hour-to-hour basis. I might do that, but they certainly were not consuming very much power during those warm days. I think I checked the power consumption. Okay, you do. It's all on your phone with these domestic hot water, these air source heat pumps these days, and it told me how much power it had been using to do the cooling, and that was below the power production of the solar panels. And if we didn't have much else on, then it would be absolutely fine. No, Pam, we haven't. Pam's house is very like ours. We haven't added extraction fans in the bathrooms. Oh, sorry. There's extraction fans in two of the bathrooms, but not in another one. That's what it is. The one that doesn't have extraction fans has a very easily openable window within reach. But sorry, two of them actually do have extraction fans. Yes. I forgot that. So yes, those were added. Those were added when we did when we first moved into the house, 2011, 2012, when it was being remodeled.
At this point, I think we'll wind up and say goodnight, wish you well. And as I say, do sign up for other events within the Open Eco Homes programme. Thank you very much. Good night.